It's an English tea morning, everyone, served in a rather unorthodox manner, which makes it a perfect morning to spend with the Beatles, and so back to Rubber Soul. Number 55 in the 150 series, genre is folk rock. The process for this song took a total of 18 hours between 4 days, much longer than any other Beatles song to date. I can't help but comment and say, for creating something that's going to last forever, basically, once it goes on recording and gets spread around the world, this music is never going to disappear. Anybody can pick it up and listen to it at any point. Yes, 18 hours is kind of long for how much time the Beatles put into each piece, but when you think about it, to spend only a few hours on something that is going to last forever and is going to be heard by millions and millions over the course of decades and, who knows, maybe eventually centuries. Isn't it kind of strange to think about it that way? When asked about the song in 1980, John Lennon simply said, "Paul, he must have had an argument with Jane Asher." John's recollections were correct. Oh, by the way, the title of this piece, I didn't even pay attention to it. I'm Looking Through You. As Paul explains, as is one's wont in relationships, you will from time to time argue or not see eye to eye on things, and a couple of the songs around this period were that kind of thing. This one I remember particularly as me being disillusioned over her commitment. With the evidence of Jane all around him, he wrote the song in his attic room at the Ashers' house on Wimpole Street. The song was probably composed shortly before recording began, which would place the writing in October of 1965. As for composer credits, Paul recollects, "I think it's totally my song. I don't remember any of John's assistance." Okay, so this is one of those, the rubber hits the road, Rubber Soul. It's not quite what we wanted it to be, and we have some difficulties. Let's see how they put this to music. Somebody's not happy. That much is obvious. You know, musically, even from before the voices entered, just at the beginning with the introduction, it brought to mind Simon and Garfunkel. There's something about the way that the accompaniment is going, the rhythm, and then when the voices came in, the harmonizing and that descending line was somewhat Simon and Garfunkel-esque too, isn't it? So, well, let's go back through and pull it apart a bit. That intro, just the guitar strumming, I think it has to do with how prominent the treble is in that upper note. Let's see, this is going to be a... It doesn't have the same ring on the harp as it has on the guitar, but somehow when I hear this upper C, it brings to mind immediately Simon and Garfunkel, the couple of songs I've heard from them. There's something about the quality of this guitar strumming that seems to belong with them. There's a little hint of just a tiny bit of twang, a lilt. At the same time, this rhythm, bum ba dee 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 da da dum bum da da da. It has a flow to it. It's not well, let me show you on the paper here. If we're looking at it this way, the first beat is a whole beat, second beat is a whole beat, third beat is divided half and half. I'll just mark it that way. And the fourth beat is a whole beat. Okay, there's our pattern. Bum bum da da dum. Now, maybe a less imaginative group than the Beatles might just repeat that. Bum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da da da. It would work, right? But what the Beatles did, or whichever one of the Beatles came up with this rhythm here, it's different in the second bar. So we have half and half for the first beat, then we have whole whole, and then we have half and half. And only after a 2-bar set do we return to what might have been a repeat of the first. But even that is not quite. We have a whole, and then we have half, 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 half. At that point, that 3rd bar, the rhythm repeats several times. So we have this very fluid, changeable point at which the beats subdivide. It's never the same beat being broken in pieces. It's this one here, this one there. And so we don't settle into a whole and divided pattern of beats for quite a while. And that's one of the things that makes this opening have this really fluid flow. And I guess I need to go back and listen to Simon and Garfunkel, because I wasn't paying attention to their beat divisions and their patterns, but somehow this recalls their music to my ears so strongly. I'm awfully curious to see if this is a trick of theirs. And then the other thing that kind of plays into it is this 1 to 4, which we start feeling right about bar 3 here, where we've got bum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum, and that gives, again, kind of breaks the pattern, because before then we were kind of doing primarily 1 chord per bar. Bum ba da 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 dum bum da 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 bum ba da 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 dum, and it's just those little things that make this feel so pleasant, so engaging, at the same time so easy to fall into, without being dull, without being boring or kind of okay, there's the intro, let's move on with life sort of thing. And now we come. And this was the other thing. Hearing these little, I guess they must be slapping their hands somewhere, but somehow, I'm not sure if it's maybe on the leg, on the arm, kind of sounds like this, right? That's recalling the intro to my ears. I'm looking through you. Pretty much just tapping along with the guitar rhythm, but it accentuates it in a very gentle way. And that was another thing that when I listened to it, I thought, I don't remember Simon and Garfunkel doing that, but somehow it brings in that vibe to me. And, well, let's see. What did they call this? Folk rock? And Simon and Garfunkel are folk rock. So maybe it's not surprising. Maybe this is a stylistic feature of folk rock. But I've heard the Beatles do several that were classed as folk rock. I've never heard something that recalls a specific other band to my ears so strongly as this one. Right? I said it was the voice harmony. That's one thing I noticed about Simon and Garfunkel, and actually it doesn't surprise me. Harmonizing in thirds and sixths is a very common folk music, doesn't even have to be folk rock, folk music trick, we could say. And in fact, if we want to bring in a sort of, maybe I would call it a modern version of folk music, I could even bring in country music, because it's a feature in country music as well, thirds and sixths. There's something so smooth and soothing about those intervals, and they're employing these here in this song. You look different, but you have changed. It's just a smooth descending line, kind of falling, gliding down, settling down. We end up on E flat, that's the 5. And then as we go back to the 1, I'm looking through you, back to the single voice. But this, if I were to harmonize it a bit fuller, you might hear it a bit more. Oh, this is a great B7 chord. So we've got the third, which the harmonizing third of the voices isn't even belonging to that chord. This is the chord. And so they're sliding through, moving through, passing through a couple notes which don't even belong to the chord as they settle down into it. And so it has this very easy kind of golden thread weaving through. It's never broken or jagged, and there's a warmth to it, a sort of bit of sunlight streaming through, which in the context is kind of interesting, isn't it? To have such a soothing sound with this idea. And listening to the music overall, I can't say that the piece as a whole is soothing, but this little passage, you don't look different, but you have changed. It's a lovely, smooth line there. What did I know? You're not the same, and it's so full of angst and anguish, and it suddenly moves more. Well, it's the flat 7. Where do we get the flat 7 from? It's from the blues tradition, right? So we have this, you're not, yeah, he's on the C flat there. So we've got, maybe I should move to the piano for these flats here. And so his voice changes. We've gone from, you don't look different, I see you have changed, what the words are. And then, I'm looking through you, you're not the same. It's the blues voice even he's pulling out of himself. That's another thing I haven't heard Paul do very much. Maybe I have, but somehow I'm not recalling it. And what I love about this is not the fact that, okay, they're pulling a bit of folk tradition here, a bit of blues tradition here. That's nothing remarkable on its own. What I love about it is how seamlessly these elements are incorporated for expressive means. And when we go through the second verse, I want to talk a bit about that. So let's just keep going here. This melody, it's a simple up and down, da 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 bum ba da da dum, kind of what I call the general rainbow shape, starting low, going up, and coming back down in a sort of arch shape, but it's broken. And what I hear in Paul's voice is a sort of stress, a strain, especially when he gets to the top. I'm looking through you. It's as if through has effort. It's taking a lot of effort and energy, and there's a strain, a stress, a tension. Even his voice itself, to my ears, sounds like it's under stress on that through you. It does not sit comfortably. And if I were to try to imitate his vocal sound, for me, it would require what we might call poor vocal technique, tension in the voice. Now, if he's doing it without tension, good for him. But that's how it comes across musically, is there's tension and stress there. And putting it at the peak of the phrase accentuates it. And so, as I said, we have this smooth line that's very folksy quality, but overall the piece has this feeling of stress and effort. And even the fact that this melodic shape doesn't really vary a lot. It's as if we're almost beating our head against the wall, trying the same thing over and over again, trying to break through, and it's just not working. Your lips are moving, I cannot hear. And even this variant of that, when he sings the last bit, you're not, it's a variant which increases the feeling of stress and tension. In that context, this beautiful descending line of harmony sounds more like it's kind of a gradual deflation. As if it's expressing the diminishing of hopes of things working out. Da, 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 da. There's just no place to really go. There's no momentum. There's no energy, drive, impetus towards anything that really is other than stressful. Because when we return, as I said, on that line, we end up with we end up on the 5, and the very next note takes us back to the 1. I'm looking through you. You're not the same. There's nothing taking us outside of the circle of stress and tension and futility in the relationship. Kind of the sharpest line of the whole piece, even though he's screaming, you're not the same, you're not the same. But the line that really cuts is this: love has a nasty habit of disappearing overnight. I mean, how direct can we get to expressing the trouble that this is in? Love has a nasty habit of disappearing overnight. And this. The first line is kind of catchy. I'm looking through you. Where did you go? It puts an image in our minds. It's picturesque. It starts to create an artistic description of this. And for a song that's expressing frustration about something in the relationship, it is really quite artsy in its way of expressing. But I was struck when we got to this line. You were above me, but not today. The only difference is you're down there. I started thinking, this song is really built around prepositions, isn't it? And to exploit the idea of prepositions in this context is kind of fun. It's a nice idea, and I think that it worked really well. I'm looking through you. So we have through, and then we have above, below. All of that is being built into this in a way that I like it. But not today. And this. Tell me why did you not treat me right? I should mention, even though it's pretty obvious, I should mention that this, would you call this a bridge section? Whatever you would call it. This section here. Remember at the beginning I was talking about the rainbow arch of the phrase. And now we have basically the reverse. Tell me why did you not treat me right? So it's an upside down rainbow. Smooth, unbroken. The opening shape had the stress at the top. Now this is descending and then coming up with a question. It's kind of like a sigh ending with a question. I'm asking you, why did you not treat me right? Really descriptive in a I don't know if I would call it subtle way, but simple way, quite direct way, without being too put on. So we have this descend and rise with these questions. And then, of course, we come to this. I'm looking through you. Suddenly this could be straight up blues. And in fact, this is the moment where I want to go to the piano and talk about why it works so well as blues. I mean, there are specific features which are being used here. Flat. And one of the features is this flat 7, which shows up every time he sings. You're not the same, you're not the same. So, as I said, we're going to keep A flat. And that means that D flat is our 4th chord. And it is, instead of having a C, we have a C flat. He's singing, you're not the same. You're not the same. And that flat 7 is such a bluesy quality. What makes it blues is the flat 7 and the 3, major, minor 3, the 4, 5, all of that is really kind of pushing us towards that. And then as he goes on, we see another flat 7, this time on the A flat, which actually has shown up in the guitar that I pointed out. Dum dum dee 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 dee, dum bum dee 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 dee, a little bit agitated and very pointy. But now the voice is using it too, while the guitar is doing that. Dum bum dee 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 dee. Ah, I'm looking through you. Right there, and you hear the swing in his style as well. You're not the same. Yeah. And then as we fall into this style, we just kind of fade out with it. And that's how it ends. So there's not really a conclusion. We're left in this state of frustration and pouring out our soul and all of that in a very, as I said, it's picturesque. It's simply applied musical techniques which are quite common, but they're applied in such a well-placed, never overdone. It doesn't feel overdone. It just works just the right amount. Here and here and here and here. And so we end up with this wonderful little miniature, which is telling us so much about the big story. It's a simple piece, but with interesting ideas and nicely, engagingly applied techniques. I find it curious that this is the piece which took them so long to record. And because there's nothing really terribly inventive or grandly imaginative, creative in it. It's more like he took all that they've got, the standard, simple stuff, and perhaps it was a matter of really trying to figure out exactly where to place these elements, how to use them, so it doesn't come across as dull or flat, because there's a real skill, there's a real art and craft and science to creating something which is not really using anything new, but still gives a fresh use of it, a well-applied use of it. You don't want it to feel like it's just an imitation, a copy. And maybe that's why it took them so long to work this up and put it together. Maybe there's another reason, I don't know. But isn't it nice to see that even as the Beatles are moving forwards in all their leaps and bounds of creativity and imagination and musical inventiveness, they're still able to return to home base, so to speak, and build something which is so well formed that it would be hard to it's hard to take this and say, well, it would have been better to do otherwise. It works just as it is. It's kind of like, I don't know, You have a dinner plate. It's a dinner plate. It works. You can change the colors a bit, but you don't really need to go changing the shape of it much, because as it is, it works. And I kind of feel that way about this piece. It works just the way it is. It shouldn't really be changed up. It doesn't need to be some new invention of something that works so well. So that was I'm Looking Through You, the prepositional conflict song. And we'll see what comes next, and I'll see you soon.